Good evening, this is Alicia Cerretani, and joining me is Lyndon LaRouche. Now the two of us are going to go through in a review the week that was. And you can say what you want about the week and characterize it how you'd like, but the fact of the matter is that this week really has been, in fact, characterized by an incredible breakdown crisis, more dramatic than anything we've ever seen before. And the two of us are going to go through a couple of the inflection points of what has happened throughout the week. And to begin with, on Monday, we woke up, the world woke up and wondered what would happen to the planet as the markets opened after our enemies had downgraded their lender of last resort and passed it off as, simple tactic. But it wasn't a tactic. Everything that they're doing shows a certain amount of desperation. But my question, just for you to begin with, is what does this mean for the average citizen? What does it mean for the average citizen that the President and their Congress are complicit in this?
Well, first of all, it means that sooner, or maybe a little bit later, the whole system, international system, especially the transatlantic system, which is going down first, this system is doomed. It cannot exist. There must be two things which occurs from the outset, conditions for survival of civilization. Number one, the ouster of President Obama. Without ouster of President Obama, not only the transatlantic region and the United States are doomed, but the collapse will affect the entire planet. The measure which is required immediately to stop the crisis, and only one measure will stop the crisis. That is, in addition to getting the president out of there. Because if you don't throw this president out, we're not going to have a civilization. We're not going to have a United States. Anybody who's defending Obama or retaining him in office is in effect the same as a traitor to the United States and a traitor to the human species also. Assuming we're going to throw out this bum, Obama, and call him a bum, he is a bum. That's the kindest words we have for him, bum. But if we don't throw him out of office, and we have plenty of evidence and grounds for doing so, we're not going to save this nation. We're not going to save civilization. Once we agree to dump Obama, then two things happen. First of all, Glass-Steagall can win. Two, Glass-Steagall can be implemented. Now that is not the limit of what must happen, but that is the precondition, the two preconditions that must occur, or you kiss the United States goodbye, but it'll be dead by the time you can deliver the kiss. Huh? So therefore, these two things have to happen. Once they happen, other things are possible. First of all, Glass-Steagall will take most of the bailout money and throw it into a different category, as the original Glass-Steagall did. That means we will no longer have a crushing debt on the United States. Well, other consequences will happen for Europe. That means that we will have reduced the liability of the nation for foreign debt. That means that we now can immediately release the funds to restore the kind of system we had before this treasonous creation that they rammed through the Congress. And that was pure treason, including Senator Kerry. He's not a treasonous man, but he committed treason against the United States by what he did. Irreparable treason, unless we change things. So now, once we have our national budget under control, we're back under the Constitution again, out from under Obama, who is against the Constitution. You have to throw him out because he's against the Constitution. On that basis, now we can stabilize things. We now would go back to what was done under the original United States, the sovereign states. We will then go back to a credit system. We will cancel the monetary system and go back to a original design of a fixed exchange rate system as well. So we will build ourselves immediately into some kind of stability. We will also probably succeed in getting European partners and others to join us in establishing a fixed exchange rate system as a credit system rather than a monetary system. That will mean we're in a position for international growth as well as other forms of growth. This now means that our attention is called, once we have fixed the bandaged the wounds and got the people functioning again, the firemen as firemen, the police as police, and all this sort of thing, schools as schools, and healthcare as healthcare. Once we do that, then we're going to say, where do we go from here? And it's be a Franklin Roosevelt-like answer. We have some certain very large-scale projects, like NWAPA. Most people today don't really remember what NWAPA was as a project. Mm-hmm. That will change the character of the entire Northern Hemisphere in itself. It will mean a new dimension of productive power for the American people and for the Northern Hemisphere. It means that Europe, like Russia, is really keyed under the presumable new president in Russia, will be positioned to join with the United States together with other European nations, in launching their own large projects in cooperation with us. China will have an expanded relationship with the United States on an equitable basis that does not presently exist. India and other countries will have, and we will fix the problem of Africa. The greatest crime against humanity is the British Empire's rule over Africa since the time the British took over at the beginning of the previous century. And these changes will mean we're back on the road of optimism. But there are other problems as well that have to be dealt with, or are byproducts of this situation.
Right, and I think it's important for people to understand that the fate of the United States is very much shared with the fate of Europe. What has happened in the United States, I'm going to go back to this downgrade, you saw the exact same thing happen in Europe over the last period. You know, the governments, take Ireland, for example, made certain agreements, made certain deals with the Troika over there. Yeah. And they were promised, okay, we'll take care of you. Okay, we've got you covered. Okay, your people will be cared for. Most people knowing that was a lie. And in fact, it was a lie because concessions were made, austerity cuts were had, compromises were made with the people, which in fact have killed people, and they were downgraded anyway. And so there's something, and so that process has now come into the United States because it hasn't been stopped, because Glass-Steagall, we have not fought back sufficiently enough against this enemy. Yeah. And we have to get people on the terms in which this enemy is advancing, and not play it as something that just happens. And it's important to see it from a worldwide perspective, because it is the transatlantic system right now is completely married in that sense.
Yes, the key way to understand this, which I think most Americans have failed to understand, they should be the first to understand. Mm-hmm. What was the process of creating the United States? How did it happen? Why did it happen? What's its significance for today? First of all, we were originally a European culture. We of the United States. That was our culture. We brought it in from Europe. We brought it in from the English, we brought it in from the Dutch, and brought it in then from French, and French also at the same time through the Canadian development. So what we did is we created a new form of society. The old form of society, which had failed because it was an European oligarchical system, a relic of the precedents of the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, the Crusader system, which is a butchery system, and then the British Empire. So we were separate from that. But we represented European culture at that time, the best of European culture, actually, at that time. That's what's founded Massachusetts. And mm-hmm. during the period of from 1620 up until the takeover by the new British Empire, we had represented something. That was crushed by the British Empire. But we remained. Franklin and others went to Pennsylvania and southward and maintained this interest. We won it. We won it because the nations of Europe, of continental Europe, were enraged at the British Empire. And therefore they joined in supporting the United States in securing its own freedom, our own constitution. France was directly allied with the United States. Spain was directly allied with the United States. Other parts of Europe were enthusiastic for the United States. And without them, we would not have succeeded. So you had a triumph of European civilization led by the symbolic issue of the United States. Then came the corruption. France was corrupt from 1782 on. We were corrupted. But nonetheless, we maintained that tradition as our constitutional tradition. And so we survived. We were set back. The British set us back repeatedly with their operations. They bought us. They corrupted our people. They corrupted our leaders. But we got it back again and again and again. Now we've reached the point, since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and then his brother later. But these were two deliberate assassinations done in the interest of the British Empire to bring down what the British consider the insolence of the Kennedys in trying to revive the Franklin Roosevelt tradition. Mm-hmm. And they assassinated President Kennedy, then assassinated his brother, who was about to become nominated the presidential candidate of the Democratic Party. And by this means, they got a war in Indochina, which was intended by the British to bring about the destruction of the United States. President Kennedy, together with Douglas MacArthur, on a military basis said, the United States shall be involved in no long wars in Asia, on the grounds that this would kill us. Was specifically Kennedy's position, and it was Douglas MacArthur's advocacy. So we were destroyed by a decade-long, needless, criminal war in Indochina. And the killing of Bobby Kennedy, who was about to become nominated for the presidency and would have won the election, he was assassinated too, to prevent what was called the Kennedy factor from continuing in the United States. But it was more than the Kennedy factor, it was the Roosevelt factor as well, because Kennedy was actually a continuation of the Roosevelt tradition from World War II, my tradition. Huh? And that's what happened to us. So now we're in a position where the entire British system is now tumbling down. Now, the British intended to do this, or the British Empire intended to do it, not the British people generally. They didn't even know what was going on. Mm-hmm. But so this happened in that way. We have to lead and bring it back. We have to bring Europe back into viability. Europe will not survive without a success in the United States of overthrowing the British Empire. It cannot survive. So we have a common cause. We also have a common cause with other nations of the world who do not want this chaos, which would mean a dark age for the entire planet. So what's happened is that these characters, and the President of the United States, the current President, is nothing but a British agent. He has nothing American in him. Only British money that bought him the presidency is what it amounted to. It was illegal funds as well, put in by the drug pushers of London, which is what the force that elected Obama. And Obama's turned out to be what he was paid to be.
Yep.
He's effectively a traitor to the United States, and should be thrown out for that reason. He's also insane. Well, that's another reason to throw him out. Nothing good there. So we have a situation where we in the United States have to take the responsibility through our tradition of leading in throwing these bums out, or throwing them out of control of our nation. And that's the only chance we have. If we do that, once we take these steps, it will then be possible to organize a recovery of the world economy. Without those steps, it's impossible. So that's what happened this week. Essentially, there were implications of that, but that's it in short.
The implications of that, but also at the private luncheon you held in Washington, D.C. in the middle of the week on Wednesday. You had a gathering of people from all over the world, and you presented this picture to them. And there was a stubborn denial that things were as you said they were, but at the same time, people knew that they couldn't explain the situation any other way, and therefore what you're prescribing as the necessary immediate actions, they knew they had to become committed to that.
Well, they're all, since they're diplomats, they have to show respect for the policy of their governments and defend it. What they think may be different, but then they will tell that to their governments, not to us.
Right.
We also have another factor in the U.S. system. We have a long patriotic tradition, which I've known. I haven't lived quite a century, but which I know very well. And there are many people who, now dead, who are my friends and with whom I collaborated earlier, who are leading people, leading forces in terms of our institutions of government, our intelligence services, other branches of our government, people from those professions. And some of us have always had our own private opinion, which we shared generally with many of our colleagues. And we have worked over the years to keep in place, in all these shifts and so forth, to keep in place those principles and those ideas which we know to be correct for our nation, even when our incumbent government is of a contrary opinion. And our system has always made room for that. That is, our system has made room for what are considered more or less dissident from the incumbent presidency or the incumbent Congress. But we are kept on because they want to keep the tradition alive. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, those who represent this kind of tradition, as now, are thinking, we have to now intervene. We have to intervene to help get this guy out of the presidency. They won't say it, but I can say it, and I do say it. Others will not say it. They don't need to. I'm going to say it. I said it. So I'm not really an isolated person in this process, by no means. My role has, in various points, especially since 1971, has been quite considerably influential. I mean, for example, the SDI was solely my creation. Others joined into it from various countries. We were on the edge of winning it. And I've been at many points in a leading position, together with these kinds of people who represent like the tradition of I was never in the OSS, but I became part of the same tradition, of the patriotic section of that. And I've always been that ever since that time. So some of us out there, people should not be too discouraged. There's some of us out there in the woods, I'm more conspicuous, who do have a commitment to saving this nation from the terrible mistakes that have been made up to this time. So the situation is not hopeless. What I'm doing is raising the call. Let's get together and do what patriots do, to save our nation and to help make the world a better one for all nations.
Thank you. Well, I think that's the point, that there was a lot that happened this week, but there's also a lot that didn't happen. And if we're lucky, we'll be blessed with another week, next week. And you can make sure to stay tuned here, because we will see you at the beginning of that week.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good night.